our recording and then get going. So I just want to welcome everybody. We have quite a few registrants for today's webinar, so I want to get started on time because we have a lot of content to cover as well. We are covering, this is part 2 of a 2-part series covering the behavioral intervention side of early intensive developmental and behavioral intervention services, or EIDBI. My name is Jamie O'Connor, and I'm with Family Voices of Minnesota. For those who are not familiar with our organization, we're a statewide nonprofit that offers information, support, resources to families who are raising children with any type of extra need. All of us on staff are parents. We are the state alliance member for Parent to Parent USA and the Minnesota State affiliate of Family Voices National. We're really pleased to be joined today by several panelists and presenters who will be introducing themselves. We're going to open up with Nicole Burning, who is the clinical lead for disability services and EIDBI for the Minnesota Department of Health. Human Services, so sorry. That happens to me a lot. Anyways, I will switch it over to Nicole and let her open us up. For some quick housekeeping, I'm sorry. The chat and participants can chat directly to panelists and co-hosts. You can put your questions in the Q&A. Because we have so many attendees, we'll try to get to as many as possible in the Q&A portion. And then feel free to chat to me if you have any questions about that during the presentation. Nicole.
Great, thank you, Jamie. So yes, I'm Nicole Burning. I'm the Autism Clinical Lead at Minnesota Department of Human Services. So thanks everybody for joining us today. We're going to go through just a brief overview of the early intensive developmental and behavioral intervention benefit and what those EIDBI services mean in Minnesota. And then our presenters are going to go through and describe that behavioral approach, that applied behavior analysis approach to EIDBI services, and really let you know what a typical day might look like for a child or a family that is receiving services within a home or center-based ABA therapy program. And then we're going to go through some really practical behavioral strategies that hopefully you can apply into your daily life and can give you a little bit more of a snapshot of what those intervention services look like through that behavioral approach. And then we'll wrap up with just demonstrating how ABA services really can be coordinated with other essential services and supports like special education services, OT, speech, and things like that. So we're going to get started with just that overview of EIDBI. So really to break down that acronym, that E stands for early. EIDBI really focuses on striving to have that early screening and identification and diagnosis and ensuring that access to those early intervention services for children. The benefit does serve children up to age 21 with a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder or related conditions as well. And the services are meant to be intensive. So that is one-on-one with a child and a therapist, or in small group settings. So maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 children working with a therapist at a time. Services on average are typically anywhere from 10 hours to 40 hours a week of intervention. And all of those intervention approaches are going to be through evidence-based, either developmental or the behavioral intervention approaches. But really all intervention is striving to help children build independence, really teaching them meaningful communication, social interaction skills, really working on self-care skills, just really helping them to be able to really participate within their home and community life as well. So there's a variety of different services that fall under that umbrella of EIDBI services, everything from comprehensive evaluation to treatment planning to those intervention services I mentioned. So last month we reviewed the developmental side of those intervention approaches, and then today in the presentation you'll hear more specifically around that behavioral approach. But again, that all kind of falls within that direct intervention service. You'll also hear the presenters talk a little bit more about family caregiver training and counseling and how that's incorporated into intervention services, and coordinated care conference, which brings together all those professionals that might be working with the child and family, and some observation and direction service, which really just helps to provide a little bit more training and supervision to staff, so we can really make sure that the program is really being implemented with a high level of integrity, and people are following through with the procedures that they're supposed to. So we do have a full online training all on EIDBI 101. So if you would like to just learn a little bit more about the program and the different services broken down into a lot of detail, we have a version for both providers and one for families. So you can access that with those links, and you'll be able to access that when you get the slides later on. And then we do also have a referral tool for EIDBI services. So this is really a step-by-step guide to accessing those services for your child. So if you have questions on how to find a provider, and where one might be located in your area, and what types of services they provide, this tool is a great place to start that process. Also helps really troubleshoot any common barriers that you might run into. So things like waiting lists to access a provider, or just any questions that you have, the tool is a great place to start to answer those questions. And then we also have a guidebook for families and caregivers as well. And this can be really helpful in just walking through all of the steps following that initial diagnosis and accessing those early intervention supports. It also goes through accessing supports through your local school district, getting in touch with your healthcare provider to see how they might be able to provide some additional services and supports. And then it really goes through helping families to set goals for your child and for your family, and what questions that you might want to ask those service providers. We know there's a lot of information and a lot of different service options out there for families. And so being able to feel empowered that you have the right questions to ask and can be informed about the decisions you're making can be really helpful. So just thinking about, do they provide services in the home, or is this a center-based program? Is this service covered by my insurance? Are other families happy and satisfied with the services that they're receiving? They might be able to connect you with other families that are receiving those services. And does the provider value your input? Are they listening to your preferences and things like that? So just a really helpful guide to be able to make sure that you're choosing the right services and supports that are a good fit for your child and family. So all of these resources and more you'll find on the Minnesota Autism Resource Portal website. So this is a complete guide to all the services and supports in Minnesota. So you can scan over that link and be able to take and browse through the website at any time. We also have a contact us form on there, and that's really helpful if you have a specific question that you don't get answered today. It's a great place to start to reach out to any of us for more information. So next, I will turn it over to our presenters.
Hello, everyone. I will go ahead and kick us off with some introductions. My name is Ashley Johnson. I'm the State Clinical Director for Northway Academy. And then we have with us Jess. I will let you introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Jessica Sauter. I am the Director of Clinical Services over here at Northway Academy.
And hello, I am Claire Anderson, and I'm the Clinical Director with Behavioral Dimensions. We provide in-home applied behavior analysis services throughout Minnesota, and also have an office in South Carolina.
And hi, I'm Jolene Germain. I'm with Solutions Behavioral Healthcare Professionals. I am our Intensive Behavioral Intervention Program Director.
Thank you, everyone. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with just some background information. So today we're really talking about applied behavior analysis, or ABA, as some have heard. So what is applied behavior analysis? Applied behavior analysis is an applied science that focuses on understanding why people do what they do and help them to learn those skills to improve that quality of life. So the A in ABA stands for applied, so strategies applied to real life situations. The B stands for behavior, so focus, observable behavior. So we really want to see things that we can physically see or physically observe with our eyes. And then you have analysis, look at what events occurred before and after the behavior to help us understand why a behavior is happening and know what strategy will increase the learning. So really using this as a tool to help us develop very specific programming for each individual to determine how are they going to increase their ability to learn the skill that we want to teach. Who benefits from applied behavior analysis? This is a common question we all get. So honestly, anyone can benefit. Children, teenagers, adults, family and caregivers, employers, teachers. It's a very widespread science, and it can really be applied to a lot of different situations and individuals. So some of the main concepts in applied behavior analysis are increasing those behaviors that are helpful or meaningful to the person. So reinforcement is something that is used that increases the likelihood that those behaviors will occur in the future. So common types of reinforcement that are used are giving praise or compliments. So just, telling people like, good job, you did this really well. Giving high fives, fist bumps, tickles, or even simply just smiling at somebody. Giving access to preferred toys or electronics. And then we really focus on decreasing behaviors that are considered harmful or impact their ability to learn. Applied behavior analysis is also all data driven. So, we collect data and assess those results throughout the entire day. So that's a very main focus on ABA, is that data collection piece. So now, who can provide ABA therapy? So we have a very structured kind of way of training individuals, and this is a very good format for you guys to have that visual representation. So the first one is what's called an RBT, or a registered behavior technician. So this individual is that person that really provides that direct one-to-one service. These services are provided under the supervision of a BCABA or BCBA, again, board certified behavior analyst or board certified assistant behavior analyst. I think that in our field, we have probably the most acronyms I've ever heard. So bear with me. I am going to be breaking them down for you as I can. But the RBT is the one that really provides that one-on-one support. They're provided a very intensive training, and again, they're monitored by additional professionals to ensure that they're maintaining those skills that are being taught over time. Then you have your BCABA. So again, that board certified assistant behavior analyst. So that is somebody that provides that oversight to the RBTs and develops some goals and programming. This individual is under the supervision of a board certified behavior analyst. So those individuals hold a master's degree, and they really provide that oversight again to the RBTs, the BCABAs, and develops the goals and programming. And then we have our highest level, which is that doctoral level. So a board certified behavior analyst, doctoral, provides oversight and goals and programming. So the team, so treatment and services are delivered by a team of mental health professionals. So this can include, your board certified behavior analysts, the highly trained staff, and of course, anyone that the family feels they would like on the team. It's important that every family feels supported and that they can have the people that are key players in their children's lives on their team. Supervisors come to the family's home to observe staff. If you're doing in-home, supervision can also be done remotely when appropriate. So you can do those telemedicine supervisions if appropriate. Supervisors will analyze the data. They make changes to the treatment goals or procedures when needed, and they provide that direction to staff on implementation. So if there's things that need to change or just a small correction in how we're implementing something, they can go ahead and do that. All staff receive that ongoing and regular supervision and training. So this is in an attempt to increase the program integrity and ensure that staff remained properly trained. Who can use ABA strategies? So ABA strategies can be successfully implemented by providers, parents, caregivers, teachers, employers, or really anyone who, again, is a key factor in that individual's life. Strategies can be individualized to the person, really based on their strengths and needs, and again, their special interests. Everything that ABA does is really individualized. Where can ABA be used? So again, really anywhere. Home, schools, employment settings. There's lots of large manufacturers, such as like Cargill, that it uses ABA. Community, again, anywhere. Strategies are often most effective when applied consistently across places and people. So that is something to keep in mind, and kind of where we really want that collaboration to happen between, whether it's an in-home center or in-home facility or a center-based facility, where Northway Academy is center-based. So we really focus a lot on connecting with the schools and the family, and any other outside location that the child might be at, so that we can have that consistency across all settings. Assessments, treatment, planning, and progress monitoring. So there's lots of things that go into, a child's success when doing ABA. So you first look at the assessments, then we go ahead and develop those goals with the family. So we take the assessments that we did, where we're really looking at, living skills, general, learning abilities, things that the child can do, gross motor, fine motor, things like that. And then we take that and we develop those goals with the family. Then we look at goal implementation. And throughout goal implementation, we do progress monitoring. So again, using the data, and then we adjust things as needed. So we monitor data on a daily basis. So if things need to change and we notice it today, we can, make that, we can implement that change even tomorrow, depending upon what the change is. Then we have goals mastered, and then we have maintenance and generalization. So something that we constantly check periodically to ensure the child is maintaining those skills. Assessments and applied behavior analysis. So assessments are designed to review the current skills and abilities of each child. Again, all of the programming is very individualized. So it's very important that we are able to complete these assessments for each child, so that we can ensure that the programming is specific to the child and how they learn. Applied behavior analysis, again, is individualized and driven by data. Some of the assessments might look like language and communication skills, social behavior and interactions. We look at self-help, daily living, and vocational skills, and then really looking at that play and leisure skills as well. We really want to identify why behavior occurs, identify what skills and strengths the child has and what supports they might need. And data gathered from interviews, formal and informal evaluations, and then observations. So really taking all those pieces that we can to ensure that we're making the best treatment plan possible for the child and for the family. We look a lot at, do they have any medical conditions that might be impacting their ability to complete a task? Maybe there's some food aversion. Well, is there a medical reason why they don't drink milk? Are they lactose intolerant? Does that make them feel poor? Things like that is what we're really looking for, just trying to rule everything out. Treatment plans. So summarizing very specific goals that a child is going to work on throughout a period of time. This will include behaviors to increase and behaviors to decrease, and it highlights priorities and preferences of the person and their family. We monitor progress, so ongoing assessments of skills. So again, as I kind of touched on, we really focus on that maintenance and generalization, which means we might have to assess those skills periodically as well to ensure that they're maintaining. We make those changes based on the data that we obtain. and ensure skills maintained over time and generalized to new people, places, and different situations. So that's one thing that we really focus on, as well as making sure that the skills that we're teaching are generalizing to other locations as well. So they're doing, you know, one skill in a center, and then they're also able to do that exact skill in a school setting or at home. Why is ABA effective? So it utilizes strategies that are useful, high quality, and proven to be effective. Strategies can be effective across the lifespan of a child. And it teaches a variety of skills. So communication, social skills, play and leisure skills, self-regulation and expressing those emotions effectively. So that functional communication. And then if data shows that we're not making progress, we can make changes to that approach, you know, almost instantly. So I think that's a key thing. Examples of some ABA strategies is reinforcement, presenting choices, breaking down skills, modeling, providing visual supports, and obviously many more. That's just a very short list. So now I will turn it over to our home-based services.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone. So again, I'm Claire. Going to be talking for the next several minutes here about the home-based services. And the next slide is just a quick overview of some of the main topics I'm going to be covering as I discuss these services. So what are they? What are some main benefits? What does a typical day look like? Talking quickly about family participation. And then I'm also going to give some examples of how to apply some of those strategies in your home, even including some of the strategies that Ashley just listed a minute or so ago. So there's certainly going to be similarities between center and home-based services, but I mean, the most blatant one here is the services, as the name suggests, they take place entirely in the family's home. So sometimes this is just a designated corner in the family room, or sometimes it's a completely separate free space or office in the house. But we do try to identify some sort of designated therapy space or room while we're in your home. And honestly, we work with what's available, regardless of how much or little room that you have. And because we're in your home, and this is where therapy is occurring, all program materials come to you. So with that too, we also try to incorporate families' toys or other items when necessary, whether that's for reinforcers or specific program materials, depending on the goal. And then another thing I'd like to point out right away as well is family or caregiver participation definitely does vary. We have some families, they have video cameras or live feed of sessions, and they watch most of the sessions, which is completely okay. But we also have other families that take that opportunity while our therapists are working with their child to get things done around the house, or maybe knock out some chores or other things on their to-do list. And then a last thing I'll note for this slide too is just really pointing out that we are very conscious of cultural considerations and family preferences. Because we're in your home, treatment is so individualized. We want to make sure that we're just conscious of the cultural considerations and family preferences. And with family preferences, I mean, that may just be specific house rules that you'd prefer us follow while we're in your home. So I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record, because as you'll see here in this slide, there's a lot of, it may vary, it depends. But just generally speaking, I still want to point out that with intensity of services, and when I say intensity, I mean number of hours, that's going to vary. So how frequently someone is working with your child is going to depend on the needs that your child has, and also recommendations from evaluations. So, I mean, it could range, it could be a very focused behavioral intervention that's maybe 5 to 10 hours a week. It also could range all the way up to a very intensive or comprehensive intervention that's 30 to 35 hours a week. And then treatment strategies may also vary. Definitely, again, everything's individualized. There's not a one size fits all After I'm done here shortly, Jessica will provide a little more information on a couple of those. I do list out a few examples like discrete trial training, naturalistic teaching, and she'll expand on that here shortly. But I basically just want to point out that it's designed to what's going to best serve your child and help him or her learn as quickly and efficiently as possible. And then also I want to point out, and this was already mentioned by Ashley, but generalization, regardless of what treatment strategy is used, maintenance and generalization is always monitored. We always want to make sure that the skills that we're teaching, they're maintaining, but they're also generalizing across people, places, things. It really doesn't do anyone any good, especially the child, if they're only displaying certain skills with one person or a very particular setting. We want to make sure that everything is generalizing. And then schedules will definitely be agreed upon before services, regardless of what in-home agency there is. So there's no surprises, and that's worked out ahead of time based on, again, on the intensity, number of hours needed, but also on your schedule. And then there are some different scheduling policies per agency that may vary, so that might be worth checking into. But one just brief example that I give here is it might be all mornings, Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 12. So real quick, I do want to touch on just some, it's kind of top 6 benefits of home-based services. First and foremost, just convenience. So we come to you, there's no need to travel anywhere. This may especially be nice for families that have really busy calendars. So it's going to be easier and then therefore hopefully less stressful. Another benefit is we can sometimes build skills and address specific concerns that are occurring primarily in the home. The other point too is in community settings, we can also help in those situations as well. There are certain behaviors that occur most often in the homes, and therefore the programs can be individualized to fit that specific environment. So some examples might be getting dressed, toileting, mealtime, a bedtime routine, or brushing teeth. And then another benefit is just, it's a familiar environment, right? It's your home. So the therapist can observe the child in their natural environment, their regular living space. And this sometimes helps just give a little bit more accurate or complete picture of kind of where the child's at, what are the strengths, what are the biggest areas of need. And then it also, again, because it's a familiar environment, the child doesn't have to adjust to a new space, especially if there are concerns or issues with the child adapting to new environments. And then another benefit is just natural reinforcers. You'll hear this throughout, and it's already been mentioned, but reinforcers are huge and a key component of behavior analysis. And that's essentially what is going to motivate your child to learn. So toys and activities that are already in your home, those are fantastic tools that the team can use to continue increasing that motivation. And then also help you be able to generalize those skills, or help the child be able to generalize those skills to you. And then a 5th benefit I'll point out is just family involvement. Again, we're in your home. So just because of that, there may be more opportunities that we see you and therefore communicate with you, or more opportunities for you to actively engage in therapy sessions. And then the last benefit I'll mention today is just generalization, teaching skills at home in a space where the items that the child already sees or uses can sometimes speed up learning. So one example might be, you're teaching the child how to wash his or her hands in the bathroom. Think about that bathroom setup definitely could be important for that child, since if you think about all the bathrooms that are around us, the location of sinks or faucets, that can certainly vary per setting. So if you start with a setting and items and materials that the child is already exposed to and familiar with, that may help speed up the learning so that they can generalize those skills more quickly. And I know team was quickly touched on already, and just given time, I'm going to breeze through this too, but I did want to just give a visual of a very general structure of a team. So I do want to point out there certainly could be other labels or positions added to this, but this is basically kind of a minimal structure that you could expect for an in-home team. And with this example, you'll see that you'll have basically 3 behavior therapists within a week coming in and out of your house, working with your child. Again, though, this is just an example, and how many therapists you have working with your child is also going to depend on how many hours your child is given. Typically, the more hours, the more therapists will be involved, less hours, less therapists involved. But the other thing that's already been spoken to as well, again, broken record possibly, is all staff, though, regardless if it's the qualified supervising professional or the BCBA, all highly trained, lots of supervision and communication across all team members. And again, I know it's already been pointed out, but just emphasizing again that supervision can also be in person or remote, and both have been effective, and we tailor it to what's needed at that time. So let's quickly dive into just in-home services, what to expect kind of on a typical day. I will say it's hard to paint an exact picture, since exactly what that looks like is going to depend on the child and the treatment plan, and every treatment plan is so individualized. But let's just at least give the basics. So let's say you have a shift in the morning, 8 o'clock, the therapist will arrive in the morning, and then essentially for the next few hours, the therapist is going to work with your child to build skills that are in that treatment plan that was agreed upon and you worked with for this next session. And so what exactly that looks like, again, the treatment strategies may vary, but no matter what, it will be a balance of building skills and play. You can incorporate breaks in there as needed as well. We do work throughout the home depending on skills too. Sometimes I think it's a misconception that is when a therapist goes in, we sit down at a table and stay at that table the entire time, which is absolutely not true. There should be a balance, and there is a balance where it's not just at the table, and sometimes it's never at the table, depending on the strategies and teaching strategies that are being used. But we do make sure that we're keeping the child engaged and supervised the entire time. Data is collected the entire time, so we can make those data-based decisions. Reinforcement is used throughout the entire session. And then there's also typically some sort of various visual supports that are used during sessions. And I will touch on these in a little bit as well, or expand on that too. And then after the end of the 3 hours for this example, the therapist will basically clean up, leave things as they arrived, or if not even better, and bring the child back to the parent or caregiver and give that parent or caregiver just a brief update of how that session went. So this is just an overview of a typical individual intervention session. So this doesn't account for family training or parent meetings, but that does bring me to family participation, which I do want to point out that frequent meetings with parent or caregivers is critical. And I mean, that could be weekly or bi-weekly, but the frequent communication is huge. And during those meetings, I mean, essentially that's the time to be updating you, the family or caregivers, on progress, discussing any concerns, any new goals that you have that you would like to work on, whether now or in the future, kind of shorter, long-term goals. And just like it was difficult to kind of paint an exact picture of individual intervention sessions, kind of the same thing for family caregiver training, since that's going to be so customized and individualized to your needs and what's needed at that time. But the biggest thing I want to point out is it really boils down to helping, training you or coaching or mentoring the family so that you can best help your child reach their full potential. I can't emphasize it enough that it's a team effort, and what that team consists of, as it was touched on earlier, it's really anyone that's involved in the child's life or as part of that child's life. So whether that's siblings or grandparents, just anyone that's involved. And I also like to emphasize that we really strive to work with families. If there's a certain recommendation or tool that isn't practical for your family for whatever reason, then let's find something else. but the family participation is huge for multiple reasons, and these are just a few of them. So I mentioned I was going to be talking a little bit or expanding on some of those visual supports. So here are some more examples. I mean, certainly not a comprehensive list of what I mean with visual supports, but some additional examples. So they could be pictures or written word cards. It could be visual boundaries. So boundaries a person can actually physically see. They could be a visual schedule or routines. And I mean, even that could look in like so many different forms. One example is to the right of this slide here, where you have a to-do list and you can check when it's all done. But again, customizing it, tailoring it so it best fits the needs of that child. Visual supports could also just be scripting, social stories, labels or cues, and then also first then boards or picture cards, and even statements too. So one example was, all right, well, first you have to do this, then you can get your iPad. And an example of the actual visual is on here on the bottom of this slide, where you could represent those expectations with pictures. So first you have to throw away your napkin. You can show a picture of a napkin, then we can go outside. There could be a picture of outside, or it could be written, but the general sequence of the first then strategy, or the sequence or formulas, basically establish a reinforcer, give the instruction and follow through. So again, really simple example there, but that's kind of a boiled down version. And then as we're talking about different strategies, last but not least, I did want to briefly touch on how we often teach these skills, and they are by breaking down a skill. And so to do this, we first need to identify that skill. So figure out exactly what is the goal, what is the target behavior. And then once you identify that, break it down into much smaller steps. And then you teach each of those steps one at a time until that full skill is really taught. And as this example shows down below, visuals are often used and helpful to help boost skill acquisition. I mean, you could certainly add more steps, you could reduce steps, you could change the pictures, all of that can certainly be customized. But the last thing I'll mention too, within breaking down skills and with any of our strategies, reinforcement is always used as well.
Okay, so next we're going to just touch on some center-based services. As we talk through this, you will notice that there are a lot of similarities. But first, I just wanted to give you guys a brief overview of what we will be covering. So that includes what are center-based services, those similarities and differences, like I said, what does a typical day look like? And then within that typical day, that structure, programming, data collection, what those look like, and then kind of going into those examples, and then how do you guys transition that into the home as well? So first off, I just wanted to talk about what center-based services are. So center-based services provide a child with a structured environment to learn a variety of important skills that can be transferred into the natural environment. And so this is obviously the difference between this and in-home, is that this is provided at a center and it's not in the family's home. And so with that, the family is able to bring their child to the center and leave them there for their session duration. With that, I just wanted to go over some of those similarities for what those look like. So the first one is just that we provide that one-to-one support with highly trained staff. So just like in home, you have that one-to-one staff coming in and working with your child, or coming into the center and working with your child. And they are then also overseen and observed by other trained professionals. And so that typically includes that behavior analyst. And so with that observation and oversight, that goes along with that team that Claire and that Ashley touched on, of you have the same idea here at the center. And so with that, you have your one-to-one support staff working with the kid. And then above that, you have that oversight and observation, just making sure that everything is going as it should and making modification and changes as needed. With that, Another similarity is also those assessments, those treatment plans and progress monitoring. That's going to look the same in no matter what setting your child is in. And then in addition to that, those individual skills that we're teaching. So they may look different based on how we're teaching those, because if you were in the home setting versus at the center, your environment's going to look a little different. So those might be those differences, but overall, the skills that we're focusing on will be similar. And then finally with that, just those family training skills. So just like in the in-home, we are providing family skills training at the center and helping to transition those skills from the center to the home. So then the next one that I wanted to touch on is just those differences. So how does it differ from an in-home service versus a center-based service? And so those session durations, they can look different. It's going to be based on like what Claire talked about, what is going to be beneficial for that kid. So are they needing more of that intensive 40 hours of session in order to help gain those skills, or are they needing more of that like 5, 10, or those like 10, 15, 20 hours, so more of that part-time? And so those would be based on that individual assessment and figuring out what is going to be beneficial for that kid. Another thing that differs is that we're able to minimize distractions to provide an environment that's highly conducive to learning. So in home, some things is where they have those highly motivating reinforcers, and we find those as well in the center. The nice thing is that we are able to modify our environment to make it conducive for learning, where in the home, we're not going to come in and change your guys' home. But in the center, we're able to make those modifications. The other one is just teaching individual and group skills. So in a center-based, we are able to work more on those group skills because there's going to be other peers that are here and able to work on those skills with that child that is here as well. And so we can focus on not only those individual skills, but helping to transition those skills into those group settings and hopefully transitioning that into other settings such as like school or things like that. Social interactions are also embedded just right in with that. So if they are working with other peers, they're able to work on those social skills and play skills and really be able to, like I said, transition those skills into the school. The other difference can include some of those school readiness skills. So again, we can modify our environment to make it more look like a school setting or things like that. So they can practice having to do a group project with other peers or things like that. The other one on here that I wanted to mention is just those structured work times to help promote those transitions to other environments. So really looking at structuring out those day. And again, these are things that you see in home as well, but trying to mimic these more on the side of like what would be seen in a school setting and getting them ready for that. And then the final difference that I wanted to touch on is just those family skills training. So in the center, it's just going to look a little differently because you may have to come into the center to do those family skills. We can do it via telemedicine, so over that video conferencing, as well as we can provide that in the home as needed and things like that too. But those family skills training can look just a little bit different because you're not always there. So next, I just wanted to touch on what a typical day would look like in the center. So Claire was able to give you guys an example of a day in home. And so I am just going to kind of go over like what it looks like at the center. And so kind of the same idea, once your child arrives at the center, they're going to have that one-to-one staff with them all day. And so that one-to-one staff can vary. It could be across multiple staff throughout the day, or it could be more just 1 or 2 staff based again on that time that the child is there. And through their time with the staff, they're going to be working on structured activities that they're going to complete throughout the day. They're going to be working on programming all day and really incorporating some of those peer interactions. And so some examples of what this could look like is they're going to have their independent work time where they're working on their individual skills that they need to work on, as well as working on those peer interactions as well. So having time set aside where more peers are in the same area and they're able to work on things such as like sharing, having conversations, taking turns and those different kind of things. And then also we can work on more of those like structured meal times, similar to like at a school setting. So like what does it look like? What skills do they need to have to make sure they keep their hands to themselves and those kind of things as well. And then finally, throughout that day, they're also going to be working on the behavior technician is going to be taking that data. So taking data on everything that a child is doing throughout the day, and then we're going to use that information, and the behavior analyst is going to make decisions based on programming, based on how they're responding every single day to what is in place. So just kind of to break down a little bit what programming can look like. These are just 2 examples. There's multiple different ways, but I just wanted to kind of touch on 2 of the main ones that we will likely use. And so the first one is more looking like seat work, also known as discrete trial teaching. And so with that, that is more of that structured time. So it's really focusing on giving that child a lot of opportunities to practice that skill and trying to minimize those distractions. So really sitting down it could be at a table or it could be on a floor. That really is dependent on the child. If we have a younger learner, that could be where we're going down on the floor, more like, like those 3-year-olds where they're going to learn more based on like play on the floor. And so we're going to be doing this kind of work on the floor. Or you could have an older kid where they're needing more of that like sit down because they're working on skills related to transitioning back into school and or even future into a job and things like that. And so we really just focus on making sure that they get to practice this a lot, and then also having that systematic approach to it. So just making sure that as we work through teaching them that it is done to promote all of the correct responding versus having them err. And then the other example that I give here is just that play or that naturalistic teaching. And so play is more done, or this teaching is more done during play or when those situations arise. And so this happens throughout the day. This is also done systematically, but examples of this could be that they're requesting help when they can't reach something, or they are identifying things in the room when they walk in to help work on awareness of what is in the room when I am entering and where is all the stuff that I need. Another example of that could be just during play with peers. We're working on as situations arise where they could share an item or they could take a turn. We're helping them through that by prompting them and giving them those opportunities to respond to those situations. So an example that I wanted to kind of break down, again, Claire was able to kind of break down, like some of those visual supports and how we utilize those. And so one of the ones that I wanted to break down was modeling. And so what this looks like is we're going to show them the skill that we want them to learn. And with that, that could include if you need your child to pick up something, you might first start by modeling what that looks like. So you're going to put the toy away and then have them practice it afterwards. You could also do this by, if there's multiple toys, I mean, most kids like to dump out a whole bunch of toys at once. So you could show them you're putting away the first one and then have them practice the next one. And you guys just kind of go back and forth. Another example of how modeling is used is with teaching conversation skills to peers. And so what we could do with this is either have the child watch another peer engage in a conversation and then they practice it themselves afterwards, or we could model that for them as well. So for the example I put in here was asking a peer about their new backpack. So I could say, hey, I really like your new backpack. Can you tell me about it? And then having that individual practice that as well. The next way that we can do this is having them imitate our action. So kind of already touched on this, but really having them practice it after we show it. And when it comes to modeling, what we really want to do is show them what we want them to do first and then have them practice. And so instead of just leaving it at you practiced it or you saw what you should do, you then have them practice. And then that last one is just using video modeling. So with video modeling, it's the same idea. It's just done through a video and making sure that it's either another peer, their age, so they can see them doing it, or it could be a staff member that we're using, or it could be a family member, like a parent doing that, and then going from there. So just a few different ways that we can do that. And then some takeaway points that I wanted to touch on. So as you guys are kind of utilizing these things, and typically the things that we talked about, I am sure that you are using already at home. And so just making sure that everything is consistent. So making sure that whatever plan you pick, whatever strategy you decide to do, that you're going to do that consistently and try to give it at least 2 weeks to make sure that it works. The next one is having them practice a lot. So have them practice multiple times to make sure that they have the skill and it's not just happening once. And then reinforcement. So we all have talked about reinforcement so far, but it's really important to find those opportunities to provide that reinforcement, and not only for the things that are, big, like those big things that you want them to do, but also like little things, just finding opportunities to provide that reinforcement for them. And then using those do statements. So just making sure that we are giving them what we want them to do versus saying we shouldn't do these kind of things. But I will kind of hand it over to Jolene to cover a little bit more based on what those are and how to transition that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jolene. I'm going to kind of tie all the things we talked about together. So the first piece is you heard the word generalization. Let's talk about what that means. So this is the ability to perform a skill in different settings with different people and continue to be successful over time. So it's important for the child to learn the skills in multiple settings, and that's what we're going to do. You heard home or services, you heard the center services. Really, the goal is to take both of those services and make sure that the child can do them in center, in home, in the school, at the grocery store, wherever is needed. So why is it important? It increases the independence and participation with family and peers. So the key component here is we want the child to be as independent as possible, and independent with family, peers, maybe at the school or with other people other than their providers. And then we transfer skills they have learned to new situations. So the goal is that they can be independent, but then they're starting to be independent and transferring the skills that they've learned in one situation to the next situation on their own and or with support if needed. How do my providers help in generalizing these skills? We talked about the different types of providers. The providers can help families teach the skills in multiple settings. So you heard home, community, school, the grocery store, restaurants, wherever the service is needed, or the skill maybe isn't generalizing to, that's where we're going to want to provide the service. And then ABA, or applied behavior analysis, is used to practice these skills in different settings until mastery and independence is gained. So we really, once again, want that child to be independent. So here's an example. Once a child is successful in transitioning between, let's say, preferred toys or preferred activities to another preferred activity, then what we do is we start to work on less preferred activities or less preferred toys. So a child may engage in their favorite coloring activity and be able to transition to their favorite game, right? And that might be easier for them because that activity or game is really preferred. Then we start to incorporate a little bit more challenging situations, and this is done strategically. Or once a child is successful transitioning at the center, we may then begin to transition these skills into the home, into the school with the teacher, like I said, at a restaurant or the grocery store or those sorts of things. And we use that as a progression. So we gain success in one area first, and then start to generalize to maybe those more challenging areas. So we use various techniques to help with the transition. We prepare them for what's next. So you saw a few examples. One more is give a verbal reminder, 5 more minutes on your tablet, 5 more minutes playing your favorite game, or giving a visual schedule that you had saw earlier, or even a timer, giving the child a timer, and then it gets a ding when the time is up, and then they get to learn to transition when that ding comes. So we start with those easier tasks before giving the instruction to transition. And then I think we all reiterated, give reinforcement for that specific transition. Next, I'm going to talk about coordinated care. So I saw a few questions in the chat about school services and maybe some coordination. So I'll talk about how that works. First of all, we have a coordinated care conference, and this is a meeting between the person, their family, EIDBI providers, and the other service professionals to coordinate services across providers and settings. So the goal of this is to manage and improve quality of care for the individual. And it's critical that we have these coordinated care conferences to make sure that we meet the child's and the family's needs. So how does this work? The treatment team will identify a minimum frequency of meetings. So you're going to get to agree upon how many meetings. Is it monthly? Is it bi-monthly? Is it, we're really high intensity and we need weekly? The treatment team is going to decide on that, and it's going to be per individual. The qualified supervising professional or one of the EIDBI providers is going to coordinate the meeting and notify the family. They're going to work with the family and notify service professionals and or others who need to attend. So the family can really request a coordinated care conference at any time. If there's changes to treatment or they just want an update on progress with all providers in the room, they can request this coordinated care conference. So best practices for coordinating services, who should be involved? The parent and guardian family obviously are involved, and then they can request anybody that they would want at this meeting. There's release of information and everything that we're all required to do, but they can request individuals to attend these meetings. All members of the child's treatment team. So, and this may be challenging, right? There's a lot of members on maybe a child's treatment team at times. Some examples are medical professionals, educational, psychological, mental health providers, speech, OT, case managers, PCAs, any other therapists or anybody else that the family would request would be in attendance for that or would be coordinated with. Okay, so the frequency of coordination, it should happen ongoing, but the frequency of the meetings where everybody sits down in the room or maybe now virtually is based on the individual need of the child's family, and then that treatment team. If significant changes to treatment occurred, it should be reviewed as a treatment team to make sure that everybody is on the same page, that we're all consistent. Although we may have different goals as different providers and different interventions, we want to make sure consistency is coordinated across teams to make sure there's no confusion between providers and more specifically for that child. So coordinating with schools, this is always a big question. Can EIDBI be provided in the school setting? The first thing I'm going to say is generalization is the goal to providing services to your child, okay? Collaboration with the schools is a key component to services. So can we go in the schools? Yes, we can. Okay, there's a couple different ways and different avenues to do this. And one is going to be entering the school or coordinating with the school as far as communication, getting them data, talking about the behaviors, sharing plans, those sorts of things. And then how can EIDBI services complement the school intervention or school intervention? So I want to reiterate that EIDBI services, they're not intended to replace educational services. That's not our goal. Our goal is to support them, is to support the child in getting those educational services so that they can benefit from the educational services that they're going to receive in the classroom. Services can support a child in developing skills in the classroom. So a behavior analyst or the behavior therapist could go in the classroom, train those skills, train the teachers, train the paraprofessionals or whoever's in there on top of that coordination. Okay, that is an option for services. Obviously, coordination with the schools needs to happen, but that is an option. So how can EIDBI providers coordinate with school intervention? Depending on medical necessity for each child, okay? The services can be recommended at a really high rate, like we talked about, 40 hours, that's a lot of service, 20 hours, that's even a lot of service. The time may be split between the school and a center or in-home services or something like that. So the goal and intent of services, if there is in clinic services or center-based services, is that we are gearing the child up to have the skills to maintain the classroom setting, maintain the skills in the classroom setting, and then continue those skills over time. So we want to get them back in school as quickly as possible. So how do you guys make referrals or how do I get my child in services? First of all, I think Nicole touched on this. There's a provider lookup tool. The link is in this. The slides will be available. So you can use this provider lookup tool. In the lookup tool, you're going to search early intensive developmental behavior intervention. Okay, that's going to give you all of the providers in Minnesota, and then you can search your specific location to determine an agency that's close to you. Once you find an agency that you think is a good fit, you're going to call the agency, ask how I get in services, how I get in contact with a provider, maybe a specific provider, and then some common questions. What type of intervention do you provide? Do you provide ABA? Is it in home? Do you do groups? Do you do social skills? Whatever you're looking for your child. How long would it take for my child to get enrolled, or do you have a current wait list? And then if there is, are there other services that may be beneficial in the meantime? Lastly, I recommend asking, and this should always be a yes, can I be involved in services? Yes. Can I observe sessions in clinic or at home? Yes, definitely. The last thing that I wanted to touch on is this is ASD Strategies in Action. This is a training. You see the contact information, asd.dhs@state.mn.us on the screen. This is for families and service providers. This is a great training. This provides tools and techniques to use. If you're on a wait list, I recommend jumping on this, getting some tools, getting some techniques for families. It also is a provider, it's a tool for providers for education and training as well. So please utilize this. If you guys are looking for some additional supports in the meantime and or ongoing. Lastly, we're right at the hour, so I want to direct any questions to the email on the screen. It's asd.dhs@state.mn.us. Please email any questions there, and we thank everybody for the attendance today, and I will pass it back to Jamie.
Thank you so much. We covered so much information today. And I know that some questions have been answered in the Q&A portion. It looks like we're getting to all of them, but we will, of course, send out a follow-up email. So if something additional comes up, then please feel free to respond to that. Just a little plug for our survey that will automatically open when this webinar shuts down. It only takes 2 minutes, and we take your feedback really seriously and review it as an organization and as families to try to offer the best content that we can. So please take a few minutes to respond to that survey. And again, thank you to our presenters and have a great day.